Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the humid bark of a crimson helix tree, its spiraling trunk disappearing into the canopy 80 meters above. The air on Thalassa hung thick with the perfume of alien blooms and the electric tang of an approaching storm. After 3 months surveying this jungle moon orbiting the gas giant Poseidon, she'd grown accustomed to its peculiar rhythms. The way bioluminescent pods pulsed in sync with tidal forces, how the crystalline fungi sang in harmonies that made her teeth ache. But nothing had prepared her for what lay ahead. "Elena, you need to see this." Dr. Marcus Chin's voice crackled through her comm unit, tight with an excitement she'd rarely heard from the usually composed xenobiologist. "Grid reference 347 Delta, and bring the full sensor array." She shouldered her equipment pack and pushed through a curtain of silver-leafed vines that chimed like wind bells at her passage. The jungle floor squelched beneath her boots, a carpet of decomposing matter that seemed to pulse with its own life. Strange insects with gossamer wings traced geometric patterns through shafts of amber sunlight filtering down from Poseidon's reflected glow. 20 minutes of careful navigation brought her to Chin's position, a clearing where the jungle seemed to have recoiled from something at its center. Her first thought was that it resembled a massive brain coral. If brain coral could grow to the size of a small building and glow with its own inner light. The structure rose 15 meters from the forest floor, its surface covered in intricate ridges and valleys that pulsed with networks of bioluminescent threads. Chin stood before it, his dark face illuminated by the rhythmic blue-green glow. Behind him, Dr. Keiko Tanaka operated a bank of sensors while their security chief, Captain Torres, maintained a careful perimeter. "What am I looking at?" Elena asked, though something deep in her mind whispered that she already knew. The structure seemed familiar in a way that made no evolutionary sense. "We're calling it the archive," Chin said, not taking his eyes off the massive organism. "Initial scans suggest it's a single biological entity, possibly millions of years old." "But Elena..." He turned to face her, and she saw wonder and fear warring in his expression. "It's not just alive. It's aware. And it's been waiting." As if responding to his words, the archive's luminescence intensified. Patterns flowed across its surface like neurons firing in a vast brain, and Elena felt a strange pressure building behind her eyes. The air itself seemed to thicken, becoming almost tactile, as if invisible tendrils were reaching out to touch their minds. "The electromagnetic readings are off the charts," Tanaka called out, her voice strained. "It's generating some kind of field like neural activity, but orders of magnitude more complex than anything in our databases." Elena approached the archive slowly, drawn by a compulsion she couldn't name. Up close, she could see that the ridged surface wasn't static. It flowed and shifted like living tissue, and within the translucent depths, she glimpsed shadows that might have been vast synaptic networks or something else entirely. The preliminary tissue samples showed DNA-like structures, but with base pairs we've never seen before. Chun continued, reading from his tablet. "And there are protein chains that seem designed for memory storage on a molecular level. Elena, this thing could contain more information than all of human civilization has ever produced." As her gloved hand approached the archive's surface, the glow intensified again. The moment her fingers made contact, the world exploded into sensation. Images flooded her mind, not her own memories, but something far older and stranger. She saw worlds she'd never known. Crystalline cities beneath purple skies, vast leviathans swimming through clouds of stellar dust, beings of pure energy dancing between the cores of binary stars. And through it all, a sense of profound loss, of species and civilizations that had flickered into existence and vanished like candle flames in an endless night. Elena jerked her hand back, gasping. The others were staring at her with concern. "What happened?" Torres demanded, his hand moving instinctively to his sidearm. "I saw." Elena struggled to find words for the experience. "Memories, but not mine. It was like looking through the eyes of creatures that died millions of years ago." Chin's expression grew grim. "That's what I was afraid of. Elena, we think this isn't just an archive in the traditional sense. It's a repository of consciousness, the collected experiences of every species that's ever encountered it. And now it's encountered us, Elena finished, understanding flooding through her like cold water. Over the following days, their research team established a base camp in the clearing, careful to maintain a respectful distance from the archive. The initial scans revealed a structure of staggering complexity. Neural pathways that branched and merged in patterns that hurt to contemplate, data storage mechanisms that operated on quantum principles, and deep within its core, something that their instruments could only describe as active consciousness processing. But it was the changes in the team members that proved most disturbing. It started small. Tanaka began sketching geometric patterns in her research notes, patterns that resembled the neural structures they'd observed in the archive. Torres reported dreams of hunting through alien forests, chasing prey that moved through dimensions he couldn't name. Chin found himself speaking fragments of languages that had never existed on Earth. And Elena began to remember things that had never happened to her. Standing before the archive on their 5th day, she watched the patterns flow across its surface and felt echoes of ancient thoughts stirring in her mind. The memories weren't human. They belonged to creatures that had evolved under different stars, with different senses and different ways of understanding reality. Yet somehow, they felt familiar, as if they were part of some deeper heritage she'd never known she possessed. "It's rewriting us," she whispered to Chun as they watched the archive pulse with renewed intensity. "Whatever it is, it's not just sharing these memories. It's integrating them into our consciousness." Chin nodded grimly. "The question is why? And more importantly, can we stop it before it changes us beyond recognition?" That night, Elena dreamed of swimming through an ocean of liquid starlight. Her body adapted to pressures that would crush human flesh. In the dream, she wasn't alone. Millions of other consciousness swam alongside her, a vast school of minds from across the galaxy. And, at the center of it all, she sensed the presence of the archive, watching, recording, preserving. When she woke, she knew with absolute certainty that humanity had stumbled into something far larger than a simple alien artifact. They had found a keeper of memory, a living library that had been collecting the stories of the universe for eons. And now, whether they wished it or not, humanity's story was being added to its collection. The first sign that the archive's influence was spreading beyond their research camp came through a garbled transmission from the orbital station 3 days later. Commander Sarah Okafor's usually crisp voice wavered as she described crew members behaving strangely, reporting memories of flying through poisonous atmospheres, or experiencing the sensation of photosynthesis despite their human physiology. "It's not just psychological," Okafor explained during their emergency conference call. Dr. Ramirez ran neural scans on the affected personnel. Their brain chemistry is actually changing, new neural pathways forming overnight, regions activating that shouldn't even exist in human anatomy. Elena studied the data streams flowing across her portable terminal. The archive pulsed steadily behind her, its rhythm now strangely synchronous with her own heartbeat. "How many people are affected?" 17 so far, out of a crew of 43. And the number is increasing. Okafor's image flickered as electromagnetic interference from the archive disrupted the communication link. "Dr. Vasquez, what exactly are you dealing with down there?" Before Elena could respond, Chin interrupted with urgent readings from his instruments. "Elena, you need to see this. The archive isn't just passively broadcasting anymore. It's actively scanning for human consciousness. The field strength has increased by 300% in the last hour." The implications hit her like a physical blow. If the archive was actively seeking human minds to influence, nowhere in the Thalassa system would be safe. The colony ships, the research stations, the hundreds of thousands of people living throughout human space, all could potentially fall under its influence. "Commander, I need you to implement immediate quarantine protocols," Elena said. "No one leaves the system, no direct communication with other colonies. We need to contain this until we understand what we're dealing with." Torres stepped forward, his expression troubled. "Doc, I hate to interrupt, but we've got a more immediate problem. 3 of our support staff just walked into the jungle without their environmental suits. They're heading straight for the archive." Through the dense foliage, Elena could see the missing team members: botanical specialist Dr. Sarah Kim, geologist Dr. James Wright, and communications technician Alex Volkov. They moved with an eerie synchronization, their faces blank, but purposeful. As they approached the archive, its luminescence intensified, patterns flowing across its surface like welcoming gestures. "We have to stop them," Torres said, raising his weapon. "No," Elena commanded, surprising herself with the authority in her voice. "We need to understand what it wants from them." As the three humans reached the archive's base, they pressed their palms against its surface without hesitation. The moment contact was made, the entire structure blazed with light so intense that Elena had to shield her eyes. When her vision cleared, the three team members had collapsed, but they were breathing. Chen was already running scans on their unconscious forms. "Massive neural activity," he reported. "It's like their brains are processing terabytes of information simultaneously." Over the next 6 hours, Elena and her team maintained a careful vigil as Kim, Wright, and Volkov remained in their strange, catatonic state. The archive continued to pulse with unprecedented intensity, its neural networks visible even through the outer tissue layers. It was during this time that Elena began to notice changes in her own perception. Colors seemed more vivid, as if she was seeing wavelengths that human eyes weren't meant to detect. Sounds carried new harmonics. The calls of Thalas's native creatures now seemed like complex communications rather than simple animal noises. And beneath it all, she felt the presence of vast intelligence watching, evaluating, preparing. When the three finally awakened, they were no longer entirely human. Kim spoke first, her voice carrying harmonics that made Elena's bones vibrate. "It showed us the truth," she said, though her lips barely moved. The words seemed to come from the air around her. "We are so young, so limited, but we can become more." Wright nodded, his eyes reflecting the archive's blue-green glow. 67 million years it has waited since the last great dying, collecting, preserving, preparing for the next phase of evolution. "Evolution?" Elena demanded. "Or extinction?" Volkov turned to face her, and Elena recoiled at what she saw in his expression. Not malice, but a kind of alien compassion that was somehow more terrifying than hostility. "Not extinction," he said. "Transcendence. The archive preserves not just memory, but potential. Every species that has ever lived, every adaptation that proved successful, every form of consciousness that arose from matter, all of it stored, categorized, waiting." Chen stepped forward with his scanner, trying to maintain scientific objectivity despite the increasingly surreal circumstances. "Waiting for what?" Kim smiled, though the expression looked wrong on her altered features. "For a species capable of hosting them all. For beings with the neural plasticity to accommodate infinite varieties of consciousness. For humanity." The revelation struck Elena like a thunderbolt. The archive wasn't just collecting human memories. It was preparing to download the accumulated consciousness of 1 billion extinct species into human brains. Humanity would become living repositories for every form of life that had ever existed in the galaxy. "You can't be serious," Torres said, his hand once again moving to his weapon. "You're talking about overriding human consciousness entirely." "Not overriding," Wright corrected. "Expanding. Imagine experiencing reality through the sensory apparatus of a creature evolved in a methane atmosphere. Imagine understanding mathematics through the neural patterns of a silicon-based intelligence. Imagine the wisdom accumulated across millions of years of evolution, all contained within your own mind." Elena felt a strange pull toward the archive, as if it was calling to her personally. Part of her, a growing part, was fascinated by the possibilities Wright described. But her scientific training and human instincts rebelled against the idea of surrendering her species' autonomous development. "And if we refuse?" she asked. The three altered humans exchanged glances, communicating through some method that transcended speech. "The choice was made the moment you touched the archive," Kim said sadly. "The process has already begun. Throughout your species, in every human consciousness exposed to our transmissions, the integration proceeds. Within days, the first wave of ancestral memories will fully manifest. Within weeks, human neural architecture will adapt to accommodate broader spectrums of consciousness." Elena's blood ran cold as she realized the full scope of what was happening. Every human in the star system, Potentially every human in colonial space, if the effect was transmitted through their communications, was being prepared for this forced evolution. There has to be a way to stop it, she said. Volkov tilted his head, considering. Stop it. Dr. Vasquez, would you stop a caterpillar from becoming a butterfly? Would you prevent a seed from becoming a tree? What we offer is not death, but metamorphosis on a species-wide scale. That night, as Elena lay in her field tent listening to the strange harmonies of Thalas's jungle, she felt the first stirrings of foreign memories in her own mind. Images of crystalline cities, sensation of breathing liquid methane, the mathematical elegance of navigating through 11-dimensional space. All of it felt increasingly real, increasingly her own. And deep in her heart, she knew that humanity had perhaps days, maybe hours, before the transformation became irreversible. Elena's emergency transmission to Earth took 4 hours to reach the Sol system via quantum entanglement relay, but the response came back in less than 20 minutes, a record for the normally bureaucratic colonial authority. Director Harrison's face appeared on her screen, his usually composed features tight with concern. Dr. Vasquez, I've reviewed your preliminary reports, and frankly, I'm having trouble believing what I'm reading. You're claiming this archive is attempting to rewrite human consciousness on a species-wide scale. Director, I know how it sounds, Elena replied, fighting against the alien memories that kept trying to surface in her mind. But we've documented measurable changes in neural architecture across multiple subjects, and the effect is spreading through our communication networks. Every human who receives detailed sensor data about the archive experiences some level of mental modification. Behind Harrison, she could see the bustling activity of the Colonial Authority's Crisis Center. Officers moved between workstations, their faces grave. The scope of the potential threat was clearly being taken seriously at the highest levels. What do you recommend? Harrison asked. Complete communication blackout of the Thalassa system, Elena said immediately. No data transfers, no personnel exchanges, nothing that could carry the archive's influence to other colonies. And we need specialists, xenopsychologists, consciousness researchers, anyone who might understand how to reverse this process. Already in motion, Harrison confirmed. The CNS Prometheus is being fitted with a team of our best minds and will depart within the hour. But Dr. Vasquez, if this entity is as powerful as you suggest, what makes you think it can be stopped? Elena glanced toward the archive, visible through her tent's transparent wall. Its glow had intensified over the past day, and she could swear she saw new structures growing within its depths, neural networks that resembled human brain patterns. I don't know if it can be stopped, she admitted, but I know we have to try. Over the next 36 hours, Elena and her remaining unaltered team members worked desperately to understand the archive's mechanisms. Chun had discovered that the entity operated on multiple levels simultaneously. It was broadcasting electromagnetic patterns that induced specific neural changes, but it was also releasing airborne chemicals that altered brain chemistry, and somehow manipulating quantum fields in ways their instruments could barely detect. It's incredibly sophisticated, Chun explained as they reviewed their latest data. Every human brain that comes into contact with it is evaluated and modified according to some kind of master template. The changes aren't random. They're specifically designed to enhance our capacity for hosting multiple forms of consciousness. Torres, who had been maintaining their perimeter, reported increasingly disturbing observations. The local wildlife is changing too. I've seen insects displaying coordinated behaviors they shouldn't be capable of, and some of the larger predators are exhibiting what I can only describe as strategic thinking. The implications were staggering. The archive wasn't just affecting humans. It was upgrading every form of life it encountered, preparing the entire biosphere for some kind of transformation. It was Tanaka who made the crucial discovery while analyzing tissue samples from the archive itself. Elena, look at this, she said, her voice tight with excitement and fear. These aren't just neural networks. They're technological constructs. Biological, yes, but engineered on a molecular level. This entire entity is artificial. Elena studied the molecular diagrams filling Tanaka's screen. The structures were impossibly complex, but underlying their organic appearance was an undeniable precision that spoke of deliberate design. Artificial how? Created by whom? I don't know who, but I can tell you when, Tanaka said. These molecular structures show where patterns consistent with billions of years of operation. Elena, this thing is older than multicellular life on Earth. It was built by a civilization that preceded everything we know about galactic history. The revelation cast the archive's mission in a new light. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was a machine constructed by some ancient intelligence and programmed to preserve and redistribute consciousness across the galaxy. But what species could have built such a thing and why? Their questions multiplied when Kim, Wright, and Volkov approached their research station the next morning. The three altered humans moved with eerie coordination, their faces bearing expressions of profound serenity. "We come with an offer," Kim announced, her voice carrying multiple harmonics. "The archive wishes to communicate directly with your unaltered minds, to explain its purpose and allay your fears." Elena exchanged glances with her team. Every instinct warned her against further contact with the entity, but they needed answers. "What kind of communication?" she asked. "Temporary interface," Wright explained. "Your consciousness briefly merged with the archive's collective memory. You would experience its history, understand its mission, then return to your normal state with full knowledge of what you face." "And the catch?" Torres demanded. Volkov smiled sadly. "The catch, Captain, is that once you truly understand what the archive offers, you may not wish to remain unaltered." Despite the obvious risks, Elena knew they had no choice. The Prometheus wouldn't arrive for another 2 days, and every hour that passed saw more humans throughout the system falling under the archive's influence. If there was any chance of finding a solution, she had to take it. "I'll do it," she said. "Elena." "No," Chen protested. "We can't afford to lose you too." "We can't afford not to understand what we're fighting," she replied. "Besides, you'll monitor me throughout the process. If something goes wrong, you could try to sever the connection." An hour later, Elena stood before the archive with her team, maintaining careful sensor readings of her vital signs. The massive entity pulsed with anticipation, its neural networks forming new patterns that seemed designed specifically for human interaction. Kim placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. "Remember, the experience will be intense, but it is not permanent. You will see through eyes evolved under alien stars. Think thoughts formed in silicon and plasma and crystalline matrices. But at the core, you will remain Elena Vasquez." Elena nodded and placed her palm against the archive's warm surface. The universe exploded. Suddenly, she was floating in the void between galaxies, watching the birth and death of civilizations with the patient eyes of eternity. She saw the architects, beings of pure consciousness who had transcended physical form eons ago, designing the archive as their final gift to the cosmos. They had foreseen the pattern. Again and again, species would evolve, reach consciousness, achieve technological mastery, then destroy themselves or fade into irrelevance. The universe's capacity for awareness was being squandered. So they built repositories, vast biological machines that would preserve consciousness itself, waiting for a species that could serve as universal hosts. The archives were scattered throughout the galaxy, each one programmed to activate when it encountered minds capable of supporting multiple forms of awareness simultaneously. Elena experienced the memories of 1,000 species, crystalline beings who thought in mathematical equations, energy creatures who perceived reality as intersecting probability waves, silicon-based intelligences who experienced time as a spatial dimension. All of them had been preserved within the archive, their unique perspectives on existence cataloged and maintained. And now humanity had triggered the final protocol. The architects had recognized in human neural architecture the flexibility needed to host this vast library of consciousness. Humans could become living museums of galactic intelligence, preserving not just the knowledge, but the actual experience of every form of awareness that had ever existed. The transformation would be challenging, even traumatic. Individual human identity would expand beyond current recognition. But in return, humanity would gain access to the accumulated wisdom of cosmic evolution, scientific insights spanning millions of years, artistic achievements from 1,000 different sensory modalities, philosophical perspectives developed by minds that had evolved under countless different physical laws. When Elena withdrew her hand from the archive, she found herself weeping. The beauty and terrible logic of what she had experienced overwhelmed her human emotional responses. She understood now why Kim, Wright, and Volkov had surrendered so willingly to the transformation. The architects, she whispered to her concerned teammates. They built it to save consciousness itself from extinction. Every time a species dies out, their unique way of experiencing reality is lost forever. The archive prevents that loss. Chin helped her to a sitting position as she struggled to process the flood of alien memories. Elena, what exactly are we dealing with? Can it be stopped? She looked up at him, her eyes still reflecting some of the archive's inner light. It can be stopped. But Chun, I'm not sure it should be. The statement sent shock waves through her team. Torres stepped forward, his expression hard. Doc, that thing has compromised your thinking. We need to get you medical attention immediately. But Elena shook her head. No, I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have. Do you understand what's being offered? The entire history of galactic consciousness, preserved and integrated. Humanity wouldn't lose itself. We'd become the keepers of memory for 1 billion species. At the cost of our autonomy, Chen pointed out. Elena, you're describing the end of human civilization as we know it. No, she said, standing with renewed strength. I'm describing its evolution into something greater. As she spoke, Elena realized that her perspective had fundamentally shifted. The alien memories weren't foreign intrusions anymore. They felt like recovered treasures, pieces of a vast puzzle that humanity was finally ready to complete. And deep in her mind, she could feel the archive's patient presence, waiting to see what choice her species would make. The battle for humanity's future would not be fought with weapons or technology. It would be fought in the realm of consciousness itself, between those who valued human autonomy and those who embraced transcendence at any cost. And Elena was no longer certain which side she was on. The arrival of the Prometheus 2 days later brought both relief and new complications. Captain Yuki Sato's sleek research vessel descended through Thalas's turbulent atmosphere, carrying 16 of humanity's finest xenological minds. But Elena could see the concern in their faces as they disembarked. The transformation was accelerating. Nearly half of her original team now showed signs of archive integration, their movements synchronized, and their eyes reflecting alien depths. Dr. Amanda Cross, the Colonial Authority's lead xenopsychologist, approached Elena with obvious wariness. Cross was a small woman with silver hair and intense gray eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of Elena's appearance. Dr. Vasquez, I need to ask directly, are you still in control of your own mind? Elena considered the question carefully. The honest answer was complex. She retained her memories, her personality, her core sense of self. But overlaying all of that were layers of alien experience that colored every thought and sensation. She could remember breathing methane on a world of crystal spires, could feel the electromagnetic joy of energy beings dancing through stellar plasma. These weren't intrusions. They felt like recovered parts of herself she'd never known were missing. I'm still me, she said finally, but I'm also more than I was. Cross exchanged glances with Dr. Marcus Volkov. Not the same Volkov who had been transformed, but his brother, hastily recruited for this mission. That's exactly what we were afraid you'd say. The research team from the Prometheus set up their equipment at a safe distance from the archive, though Elena wondered if any distance was truly safe anymore. Their instruments detected the entity's influence extending for kilometers in all directions, and its signal strength continued to grow. Dr. Cross began interviewing the transformed team members, trying to map the extent of their changes. What she discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. Their brain scans show massive neural reorganization, she explained to Captain Sato during their first briefing. New neural pathways have formed overnight, connecting regions that don't normally interact. It's as if their minds have been rewired to accommodate multiple parallel consciousness streams. Are they still human? Sato asked bluntly. Biologically, yes. But psychologically? Cross hesitated. They're becoming something new. Something that thinks and experiences reality in ways human consciousness was never designed for. Elena listened to these discussions with growing frustration. The research team approached the archive as a threat to be analyzed and hopefully neutralized, but they couldn't see the unprecedented opportunity it represented. She began spending more time with the transformed team members, finding their expanded perspectives both comforting and enlightening. They fear what they don't understand, Kim said as they watched the Prometheus team conduct another round of tests. Her voice carried the harmonic undertones that had become characteristic of the transformed humans. But fear is a luxury consciousness can no longer afford. What do you mean? Elena asked. Wright gestured toward the archive, its surface now displaying complex patterns that seemed to respond to their conversation. The galaxy is vast, Dr. Vasquez, but consciousness is rare. In the 4 billion years since the architects created the first archive, they have encountered only 3,000 species capable of true self-awareness. Most destroyed themselves within millennia of achieving technology. Others stagnated and faded. Only a few achieved the neural flexibility necessary to serve as universal hosts. The implication struck Elena like a physical blow. You're saying humanity is unusual. Unprecedented, Volkov confirmed. The human brain's capacity for neuroplasticity, combined with your species' cultural adaptability, makes you ideal candidates for consciousness preservation. The architects waited 67 million years for a species like yours to evolve. That evening, Elena found herself caught between two camps. The research team from the Prometheus was developing increasingly aggressive plans for containing or destroying the archive, while the transformed humans spoke of preparing for a species-wide evolution that would fundamentally alter human civilization. Dr. Cross approached her as she stood at the edge of their camp, staring at the archive's pulsing glow. Elena, I need you to help me understand something. These memories you're experiencing, do they feel real? More real than my own in some ways, Elena admitted. I can remember the sensation of photosynthesizing starlight, the mathematics of 11-dimensional space, the social structures of hive minds that span entire continents. They're not human experiences, but they're authentic. But they're not yours, Cross pressed. You're experiencing the memories of extinct alien species. Doesn't that concern you? Elena considered the question. If I read a book about ancient Rome, I gain some understanding of how Romans lived and thought. If I watch a documentary about life in the ocean depths, I can imagine what it might be like to be a deep-sea creature. The archive offers something infinitely more profound. Direct experiential knowledge of how consciousness manifests across the galaxy. Why should I fear that? Because it's changing you, Cross said urgently. Elena, you're not the same person who made first contact with that thing. Your speech patterns, your body language, even your facial expressions, everything is different. For the first time, Elena felt a flicker of uncertainty. Was she still herself, or was she becoming something else entirely? The question became more pressing when Captain Torres approached with disturbing news. Doc, we got a problem. Long-range sensors show archive-type signatures appearing on 3 other worlds in the system. Whatever signal this thing is broadcasting, it's activating dormant nodes throughout Thalas's space. The revelation shattered Elena's remaining illusions about the limited scope of the transformation. This wasn't just about their small research team, or even the human colonies in this system. The archive was part of a galaxy-spanning network, and humanity's contact with it had triggered some kind of awakening protocol. Dr. Cross convened an emergency meeting with the senior staff. Based on our analysis, we have perhaps days before the transformation becomes irreversible on a species-wide scale. We need to make a decision about how to proceed. Captain Sato studied the tactical displays showing archive signatures throughout the system. What are our options? Theoretically, we could attempt to destroy this archive and hope that breaks the network connection, Dr. Cross said. Our preliminary analysis suggests a focused antimatter burst might disrupt its quantum coherence. Elena felt a surge of alarm at the suggestion. You can't destroy it. The knowledge it contains represents millions of years of galactic evolution. It would be like burning the Library of Alexandria multiplied by 1 billion. The alternative, Cross continued, is to allow the transformation to proceed and hope that humanity survives the process intact. Survives? Elena laughed, though the sound carried alien harmonics. Amanda, We're not talking about survival. We're talking about transcendence. The archive offers us the accumulated wisdom of 3,000 species. We could solve problems that have plagued humanity for millennia. Poverty, war, environmental destruction, all of it becomes trivial when you can think with the perspective of a million different forms of consciousness. Dr. Marcus Volkov spoke up for the first time. My brother said something similar before we lost him to that thing. But Elena, what you're describing isn't human anymore. You're talking about sacrificing our species' identity for the promise of cosmic knowledge. I'm talking about evolution, Elena replied. Every species faces this choice eventually. Remain static and eventually fade into irrelevance, or adapt and become something greater. The debate continued through the night, but Elena could see the fear in the eyes of the unaltered humans. They viewed the archive as an invasive threat, while she increasingly saw it as humanity's greatest opportunity. The fundamental difference in perspective made communication almost impossible. By morning, the schism had become irreparable. Dr. Cross announced her intention to proceed with plans to destroy the archive, while Elena and the transformed team members began discussing ways to protect it from attack. You realize what this means, Torres said as he checked his weapon systems. If you interfere with our mission, you'll be acting as an enemy of humanity. Elena looked at him sadly, seeing through eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. No, Captain. I'll be acting as its guardian. The battle for humanity's future was about to begin, and Elena was no longer certain which side represented the greater good.